Watch out for a sort of invidious binary in the text, masters and slaves, master morality and slave morality. The reason you should watch out for this invidious binary is that for Nietzsche, these are metaphors that tell you something about the origins of these value systems, and ultimately you will find out that for Nietzsche, neither are satisfying. In other words, they're not positions he would adopt now, and they're part of how our culture's moved. He will identify the Greek ideals with master moralities and the Christian ideals with slave moralities. Hardly surprising, now is it? Because even if you see a Chuck Heston movie about early Christianity, you notice what you could hardly help but notice, that the origins of Christianity are among the classes of the despised, the oppressed, and the slaves. Hard to miss. Jesus isn't hanging out at the Kiwanis Club. He hangs around with hookers and cheats and frauds, charlatans, all the time. Only time he ever bumps into religious people, he just pisses them off, kicks over their tables, makes fun of them in their synagogues. Well, I mean, that's a fair reading of the New Testament. That's not outrageous. Just read the damn book. Again, through long canonical use, you can lose the ability to read. Nietzsche said one bad thing about Christianity is it can make you forget how to read. It'd be great to read the New Testament and pretend you'd never heard anything about Jesus. It'd be a lot of fun. Because you might find a totally unrecognizable character. You know? I mean, he had one real close woman friend. She's a hooker. I mean, that's not interesting to you? It is to me. It wasn't the wife of the vice president, the current vice president. It was a prostitute. And I'm not here to stone her because I did agree with perhaps one of his profound remarks, Jesus's, in the New Testament. That's if you're without sin, you can cast the first stone. And that generally would stop a lot of stoning, I think. It's not a sermon, but it's just a piece of advice. Well, Nietzsche, in Genealogy of Morals, contrasts the master morality of Greece with the slave morality of Christianity, and then follows it through to its next phase. One of the reasons he could do this so brilliantly, I think, is because of his background as a philologist. Nietzsche's background as a philologist, okay, there's a place for it. Nietzsche's background as a philologist warned him that certain words that were important in evaluation underwent very interesting semantic shifts between the Greek period and the Christian period. So, for example, the Greek word for excellence, arete, which is as close as we can come to saying it in West Texas, arete might be another way, the Greek word for excellence comes to be translated in the Christian medieval period as something different, and then by the time we get to the King James Bible, and this is important, I want to just skip sort of to the King James Version, because now we get for excellence something like, trying to think of the exact word here, the movement is from excellence to virtue, piety. Sometimes as narrow as piety, virtue, piety. Well, let me try to give you a sense for the difference, and then that Nietzsche wants to draw out here. An excellent Greek on the model of the master set of values that the Greeks held was someone like Odysseus, a great example from Quito, a nice example of an excellent Greek. He was excellent because he was, in a sense that today we wouldn't understand at all because of the division of labor, he was well-rounded. Odysseus could tell a lie well, which is a virtue. To know when to lie and to who and about what is a virtue to the Greeks. It's a powerfully smart one. For example, if a god questions you about if you messed around with something, it's very nice to be able to fool him. Odysseus could build a boat, drive a furrow straight, sing a song, fight in a battle, throw a discus, many other things. There's a lot to it. Very well-rounded, interesting. Noble values. In short, these noble values were what Nietzsche calls active powers that, as it were, would see what they wanted to act upon and then act upon it. And those were for him noble values, and he calls them master morality. However, they are naive. He points that out later, and I'll get around to that when I try to explain. Now I want to make the quick move from that idea, that Greek ideal of excellence, which is well-roundedness in many areas. Well, if you think of that and then you think of something like virtue, don't you see that the semantic terrain has almost reversed? Because certainly in the Victorian period, to be virtuous meant to deny one after another all those aspects of your active powers which were celebrated in this earlier use of the word. Namely, I won't do that, it's a sin, I'm virtuous. I won't do that, it's a sin, I'm virtuous. I won't do that, it's a sin, I'm virtuous. I won't overeat. Sex, out of the question. No. Just say no. Just say no. So Nietzsche's point was that this transformation from a master to slave morality was life-denying, not life-affirming. Life-denying. And it was life-denying in this first, quite ordinary sense. Namely, that the active powers that human beings wanted to realize become inwardized, turned against themselves, and become a series of just say no's to various aspects of the things that make us human. Things that are ignored by theorists, academics, philosophers, literary critics, and others. Topics we ought to discuss, like how good's our food, how warm's our house, how much fun do we have having sex. We don't talk about that much, and yet that's the fabric that makes a life that flourishes. Not whether Shakespeare's in the canon or not, or whether Mel Gibson plays him or not, but whether we're healthy and well and feel good and, like Odysseus, can do many things and enjoy a whole bunch of them. That was, at least, this is the movement that Nietzsche wants to trace. Now, these life-denying values of Christianity, he's not simple-minded on this, and his criticism of Christianity is not simple-minded. So I want to end this lecture on the genealogy and then pick the genealogy up in the next lecture again with the following remark. Nietzsche didn't think that the movement to what he sees as the slave morality of Christianity and its life-denying aspects is entirely negative, because it made the human race more subtle, more devious, more mendacious. Oddly enough, until Christianity came along, human beings, according to Nietzsche, weren't nearly tricky enough, weren't nearly clever enough, mendacious enough, creative enough. No, the Greeks who, just, well, I lied to a god, I did this, and it's... No, Christianity goes, I love you, in this very strange way we'll examine later. But not until it comes into the world, as Nietzsche sees it, do human beings actually become these sort of subtle, mendacious, tricky people with deep subjective problems, strange consciences, and guilt with all its many wonders is born into the world. And we'll discuss that next time when we return to the genealogy of morals.